We are going to talk about carbohydrates in Chapter 4. Carbohydrates are also known as the efficient fuel. They are the preferred source of energy for our body. It's what we all love the very most. There's lots of different variety of different types of carbohydrates. They're very palatable. It is the most economical form of energy for our body. So we would like to make our patients aware of different carbohydrates and their consumption and the effects that they have on the body. And we're going to learn more about that in this chapter. There are different classifications of carbohydrates based on the number of carbohydrate atoms or carbon atoms that they have. There are disaccharides, which di means two, so there's two simple sugars joined together, or polysaccharides. There's also monosaccharides, which is a single sugar. So those are the three different types. The polysaccharides tend to be the complex carbohydrates, the ones that are probably a better choice for us overall. And mono and disaccharides are your simple sugars, which are probably the ones we should choose least. They are cookies, cakes, a lot of processed sugars, things like that. In your book, it gives an image of the breakdown of glucose for digestion into our body. It starts as a starch molecule and then is broken down into different smaller sugar molecules until it reaches glucose, which is the sugar that our body uses for energy. Here are the mono, di, and polysaccharides, just an image. The monosaccharides are your fruits, vegetables, honey, nuts. Disaccharides are your sugars and milk. And then polysaccharides, like I said, are the starchy foods such as rice, potatoes, corn, wheat, things like that. Monosaccharides are absorbed without further digestion. So that is glucose in glucose form. When we are taking in disaccharides and polysaccharides, it is required for our body to break those down into glucose in order to be used for energy for the body. Glucose is found naturally in fruits. The only sugar that's transported through the bloodstream is actually glucose. It's stored as glycogen in our liver and our muscles, which can be called upon if we run out of glucose. Our body can then turn that glycogen into glucose. Fructose is found naturally in honey and fruits, which is kind of easy because it starts with fru. It is the sweetest monosaccharide. Galactose is rarely found free in nature, but it is, if you think lactose, it is from milk, a milk sugar. And then there are sugar alcohols that are formed from or converted to sugar. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a bit. Disaccharides are sugars that cannot be metabolized by the body. They have to be broken down into glucose. These contribute to body functions after digestion. So sucrose is commonly known as table sugar. It is produced from sugar cane or from sugar beets. Lactose, as you all may know, is that sugar that's naturally found in milk. It contains galactose and glucose. And then maltose contains two molecules of glucose, and it is found in malt type beverages and products. Our complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates contain more than 10 monosaccharides, hence the poly means many. Starches such as roots, like potatoes, things like that, turnips, vegetables, cereal grains, legumes, all fall under this category. There are glucose polymers as well. They are industrially produced carbohydrate supplements that are composed of glucose, maltose, and added dextrins. And then, like I said, glycogen is the storage form of these carbohydrates that will provide us energy, that's stored in the liver and the muscle and can be called upon if needed. Dietary fiber would also fall under the complex carbohydrate category. And what fiber is it's a non-digestible component of our food There are soluble dietary fibers, and these would be very thick if put into solution. Soluble, I think of a gel type texture, and if something is soluble, that means that it will dissolve in water. So that would be the viscous thick solution. If a dietary fiber is insoluble, that means it does not dissolve in fluids. This is going to bulk up the waste product. So I think of things like, I actually think of sawdust, because sawdust will not mix in water. So any of those products like cereals that have a lot of fiber, or Metamucil, or those things that you stir into water and then you have to drink them really fast. You need to make sure you have plenty of water with them, because they'll choke you because they don't dissolve. That's our insoluble dietary fiber. We then see some resistant starch, which is a dietary fiber that cannot be digested. It traps water and adds bulk to the stool. Functional fiber is added during the manufacturing process. So that's when the manufacturers process the food and then they add that fiber to the product. And the total fiber is the sum of any dietary fiber and functional fiber in a product. The best source of fiber for constipation. Fiber can be used in two ways. If we're constipated, we're going to need to have something that is insoluble, like bran. It'll initiate slowly. It'll help the patient to avoid gas and bloating. You want to not take a bunch of this type of fiber in excessively, because it could lead to diarrhea and decreased mineral and vitamin absorption. So bran would be good to relieve constipation. For the control of diarrhea, vegetables and fruits that are high in pectin, such as bananas, potatoes, apples, will bind water and decrease transit time. So oftentimes when my kids were sick and suffering with diarrhea, the doctor would recommend the brat diet, which is bananas, rice, applesauce, or toast, and that would help bind the water and slow down that diarrhea. Here's an example of some fiber-rich foods. Adequate total fiber intake is 14 grams per 1,000 calories a day, and we're supposed to be, most of the nutrition labels are based on a 2,000 calorie day, so that would be about 28 grams for 2,000 calories a day. They say 25 to 28 grams a day for women, and 38 grams a day for men is typically where they'd like to see it. So the roles of carbohydrates, what is their primary job? Energy. We want to use carbohydrates for our energy source because it is turned into glucose, which is the preferred source of energy for our body. Carbohydrates can also be stored as fat, as can any calories that we take in. They're helpful for the conversion to other carbohydrates. They can convert to amino acids. They're good for normal fat metabolism. One of the most important things with carbohydrates is they are protein sparing. So our body, if we have enough carbohydrates on board, we don't have to call upon our protein stores that should be busy taking care of building and repair and immunology and immunity and infection, and all those things is what protein needs to be concentrating on. So we are using our carbohydrates, sparing our protein for that. Carbohydrates are also important in the bacteria that are naturally found in our intestines, as well as gastrointestinal motility with the fiber like we just discussed. This chart shows us how much of grain, whether it's whole grains or refined grains, the average grain intake and average whole grain intake. You can see that the blue dots are the average whole grain intake, and the red dots are refined grains. We would like to increase our average whole grains, but like I stated in one of our first 3 chapters, whole grains are hard. You really have to read labels and make sure that the product that you are purchasing actually, even though it's brown and looks like whole grains, make sure on the ingredients that whole grains is the first or one of the first ingredients listed. We'd like to have carbohydrates make up no more than 65% of our total calories for the day, but no less than 45% of your daily calories. So that's kind of where you want to be. And with women, that's typically between 180 and 230 grams per day, and men 200 to 330. You can obtain carbohydrates from milk, grains, fruits, vegetables. Other sugars are sources as well, but we'd like to keep these under 10% of our total calories. So table sugar syrups, jellies, jams, honey, things like that, we would like to keep those as discretionary calories, under 10% of our total calories from those sugars. 4 grams of sugar equals 1 level teaspoon. So that's kind of the conversion there. Carbohydrates are very important if we're talking about hyper and hypo states. Hyperglycemia is high blood sugar. This is really important for diabetic patients, but we would like our blood glucose level to be below 130 milligrams per deciliter before a meal. If it is higher than that, if it is higher than 130 milligrams per deciliter before meals, then that is classified as hyperglycemia. A blood glucose level after you've eaten, and they want you to take this 2 hours after a meal, should not be above 180 milligrams per deciliter. A hypoglycemic is someone whose blood level falls below 70 milligrams per deciliter. Hypoglycemia is fairly common, and it is really important for those people to keep tabs on their glucose levels, and may even have to carry around little coolers of protein and a carbohydrate. A lot of times people think that for hypoglycemia you need to just ingest sugar, and it's important to also pair that with a protein for balance in the body. How much carbohydrate is excessive? So added sugars can result in an inadequate intake of foods that contain the necessary micronutrients. So if we're eating simple carbs and we're not eating the best carbohydrates for our body, we're filling up on things that aren't going to be providing us the nutrients that we need. So that would be if you're eating in excess of 25% of your total calories from these added sugar type carbohydrates, that might be a problem for overall nutrition. Our dietary guideline is concerned with the consumption of excess energy and not enough vitamins and minerals. So again, it's nutrient dense. Let's choose things that are going to provide us the carbohydrates we need without the excess calories. From that, we hopefully will avoid weight gain. Average intake of sugar for males and females is in the red. The red squares represent the average intake of sugars and the recommended maximum limit. So you can see how far above our recommended amount, which is the 10% of our daily calories, that the average American falls. We take in way too much sugar. Hence the high number of diabetic patients in our country. So regarding obesity, there are 4 scientific health organizations that have concluded that dietary sugars themselves are not associated with causing illness or chronic disease, including obesity. Food energy density and pleasures derived from eating promote excessive energy or calorie intake. So basically, it all comes down to calories in, calories out. If I'm taking more calories in than I am burning, then I'm going to gain weight. However, that being said, no, it's not just sugar. It's anything that I'm overeating can cause that. However, if you are overeating sugar you are not getting the nutrients that your body needs from a healthier choice. Some of these studies actually show an association between a higher intake of whole grains with healthier weights and fat stores. I believe the reason for that is those whole grains and foods of that nature tend to be more filling and satisfying. So probably that leads to a healthier body weight. And then the dietary guidelines recommend a fiber-rich diet to help that management for the same reasons, also to promote healthy GI motility and GI health. Cardiovascular disease, there is an association between diets rich in added sugar and heart disease. They think, but it's controversial. Like I just stated, some say yes, it is, some say no. It's not evidence-based proven that sugars do cause an increase in cardiovascular disease, but it is something that we would want to encourage our patients to make the healthiest choice they can. Frequently, especially in today's world, carbohydrates are eliminated or at least reduced significantly in an effort to lose weight. These are all the keto diets that you're hearing about. Extremely low carbohydrate diets lead to the state of ketosis. And so that's when your body is actually burning its own fat for energy and instead of carbohydrates. When that occurs, your body releases ketones. It throws you into a state of ketosis. And the thought is if you can keep your body at that state, it will burn fat. It has proven to be a useful diet for people that need to drop weight really quickly in a short amount of time, such as diabetics that are trying to get weight off to manage their blood sugar. But these type of keto diets are not a good idea for a long period of time. It's typically what they'll do is they'll have their bodies get into the state of ketosis, not ketoacidosis. That's a whole different state that can be deadly. But ketosis is just that state where you're burning your own fat for energy. You are taking in carbohydrates. It's just an extremely reduced number. So that's kind of how the keto diets work. So when complex carbohydrates are eliminated, we also risk taking in an insufficient amount of B vitamins, iron, and fiber. So all of those vitamins and minerals are necessary for the body to use glucose as a source of energy. So you can see how this is not something that you would want to do for an extended period of time because you could become nutrient deficient. What ketosis does is it increases the acidity of our blood, and that's how when it goes on to ketoacidosis, it can become dangerous because the blood becomes too acidic. Here is a keto food pyramid, and as you can see, they include in the triangle above all of the things that you can have on a keto diet, and then all of the things below with the line through them are the things that you exclude. So no bread, pasta, sugar, milk products, corn, beans, or rice. You're only getting your carbohydrates from vegetables and from berries, things like that. And berries are the only fruit that they are allowing on this as well. The ADA recognizes that carbohydrates provide energy required for optimal nutrition. However, we do know that some carbohydrates, especially fermentable carbohydrates, lead to dental caries. Sucrose, table sugar, is the disaccharide, and monosaccharides such as honey and fruit and things like that have properties that can promote bacterial growth. So what happens is if a patient is insufficient at removing plaque and they take in a lot of these sugars, those sugars are providing food to the bacteria that will then grow and cause decay. So the Streptococcus mutans, the S mutans. Fermentable carbohydrates are metabolized by that bacteria in plaque biofilm, and then that's what becomes the problem. So encouraging our patients and educating them on this fact will make them understand why it's so important to remove that plaque biofilm daily, at least twice a day. So the reduction in salivary pH to less than 5.5 is when we consider it cariogenic, and that can happen when we take in fermentable carbohydrates. And you guys will be doing a project where you will identify all the fermentable carbohydrates that you take in your 3-day food diary, and you will log how much time your teeth were exposed to that. And there are charts in your book that will show you how much those specific fermentable carbohydrates decrease the pH of the oral cavity. It's kind of interesting to find out what effect that can have on our teeth. Dental erosion is a chemical reaction. So it's going to happen from an acid, and this will occur with frequent exposure to any liquid with a pH lower than 4.2. It can also happen from stomach acid or regurgitation. You hear people have GERD, and that is the backup of those stomach acids into the esophagus and the oral cavity that can then lead to erosion. Bulimics can have this problem. People that have bad habits of holding citrus fruits or anything acidic against their teeth, we can see this erosion. So research has also suggested that enamel erosion can occur with different beverages, such as the energy drinks, sports drinks. Soda has, I believe, phosphoric acid and carbonic acid. And so therefore, regular soda obviously is worse because it contains sugar as well, and so do the sport and energy drinks. But diet soda can also, if a patient is drinking enough diet soda, it has acid in it. Doesn't have sugar, but it does have acid, which can lower that pH and lead to decay as well. Anti-cariogenic substances can reduce caries by preventing the bacteria from recognizing a cariogenic food. So there are some sugar alcohols that we'll talk about that are out there, such as xylitol and erythritol, that are being used in these sugar-free or diet products, and those have proven to be anti-cariogenic, which is nice, very helpful. I like this picture because it gives us an idea of how much sugar you're actually taking in. 4 grams of sugar, like I said, is 1 teaspoon, and the recommended daily intake of sugar is 9 teaspoons, 36 grams, or 150 calories, or 6 teaspoons, 25 grams, and 100 calories. I think this is men versus women. So if we look at this chart down here and look at the very first Monster drink, has 13.5 teaspoons in one Monster, which is, you know, not double, but 1.5 times what you should have in a day. Even the vitamin waters that we think are so healthy have 8 teaspoons, which is almost your daily. Mountain Dew is the highest. It's got lots of sugar, lots of caffeine, lots of calories. That's probably one of the worst drinks that a person could have. So it's just kind of interesting to do this visual with sugar cubes to see exactly how much sugar you're getting and your kids are getting when you're handing them these vitamin waters or Gatorades that we think are so healthy. Luckily, they do make sugar-free options out there. In like G2 and the vitamin waters they also have that are not sweetened with sugar. So those are some things that you might look for. Added sugars in the U.S. population for patients or people that are 2 years and older. So the biggest majority of our added sugar is coming from our beverages other than milk. Or fruit juice. So that's all those sport drinks, soft drinks. They divide it down farther into soft drinks, sport drinks, coffee and tea with all the good stuff in it. So that makes up about 47% of our added sugars. Then the other thing is our snack foods. 95% of snack foods are fermentable carbohydrate of some sort. So that would include chips, crackers, candy, donuts, all those things that we use for snack foods are fermentable. So snacks and sweets make up the 31%. And remember I mentioned that vegetables and grains were probably the best source because they're complex carbohydrates for our body. Those make up together 9%. So you can see how we're out of balance with making the nutrient-dense choice when it comes to our carbohydrates. So some of these non-nutritive sweeteners and sugar substitutes, they are, like your Splenda, your sucralose, aspartame. They're synthesized out of fruits, herbs, and sugar, many of them. So consumption of these low-calorie or non-caloric sweeteners is increasing faster than the caloric sweeteners. And America's body mass index have risen with the rise of non-nutritive sweeteners. So that's interesting. I looked into that a little bit more, and I think if you look at, there's a chart in your book that shows the sweetness of these non-nutritive sweeteners and sugar substitutes in comparison to sugar, and they are, 4 times as sweet, 100 times as sweet. And so what that does is make your body crave and want sweeter, 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 sweeter. So when we take these products in, our body wants more sweet, or they even say, like, if you drink diet soda, it makes you crave carbohydrates. So I think that's where this rise of body mass index is coming from, is these things are making us crave the added sugars and carbohydrates that we should not be consuming. So many consumers, obviously there's always been a question about the safety of non-nutritive sweeteners such as saccharin way back in the day. The only one that we know cannot be taken in is aspartame, which is NutraSweet. It's safe in moderate amounts for all individuals except for phenylketonureacs. And those babies are born with the inability to metabolize and break down the amino acid phenylalanine. So they cannot have anything that's sweetened with aspartame. There have been many studies suggesting cancer from, I know saccharin was one, whether some of these sweeteners cross the placental barrier. They don't recommend pregnant women take in some of these. So that's where the consumer safety questioning comes in. And there's more about that in your book. These are all FDA approved. Saccharin, aspartame, sucralose, asulfame, and neotame. So these are the 5 that have been approved, and they are regulated as food additives.